Don't worry, the power of attorney gives me full control. The realtor said we can get it on the market by Monday. He'll be in this recovery center for at least 6 weeks. The house will be sold and the money in our account before he even knows what's happening. The voice was my son's, Mark's, but the words were venomous, shaped by the avarice of his wife, Sarah. I could hear her whisper her agreement, a serpent's hiss in the quiet of my hospital room. They thought I was asleep, lost in a fog of post-surgical medication. They were wrong. In that moment, floating in the sterile twilight between consciousness and slumber, a cold, hard clarity washed over me. The pain in my hip from the replacement surgery was a dull throb compared to the sharp, piercing agony of their betrayal. They thought I was finished, a relic to be cleared away with the rest of the old furniture. They had no idea I was just getting started. The house they were so eager to sell wasn't just wood and nails. It was a living monument to my life, to my love for their mother, my late Eleanor. I had built it with my own 2 hands, on a plot of land we'd bought with every penny we'd saved for the first 10 years of our marriage. I remembered the summer of '78, the sweat beading on my brow as I hoisted the first truss into place. Eleanor would bring me lemonade in a tall, frosted glass, her smile as bright as the July sun. "It's going to be beautiful, Arthur," she'd say, her hand on my arm. Our forever home, every floorboard held a memory. The faint scratch near the hearth was where Mark, at age 5, had tried to drive his toy truck to the moon. The small water stain on the ceiling in the guest room was from the time we'd forgotten to close the window during a thunderstorm, and we'd laughed until we cried, mopping it up together. The notch on the kitchen doorframe marked Mark's height year after year, a ladder of growth that now seemed to lead nowhere but down. That house was my sanctuary, especially after Eleanor passed. Its familiar creaks were her whispers in the night. The way the morning sun hit the breakfast nook was her warm smile. It was the last tangible piece of her I had left, and my son, my only child, was selling it for parts. Lying there, feigning sleep, I let their conversation wash over me, each word another stone laid on the grave of the love I had for my son. They spoke of commissions, closing costs, and a new car for Sarah. They debated which luxury nursing home would look best on paper, one that was just far enough away to make visits a convenient rarity. Their voices were clinical, detached, as if they were discussing the liquidation of a failed business, not the dismantling of a man's life. When they finally left, patting my hand with false sympathy, the silence they left behind was deafening. But it wasn't empty. It was filled with a new and terrible resolve. The grief of their betrayal began to cool, hardening into something else, something solid and unyielding. It was the foundation for a new construction, not of a home, but of a reckoning. My first week in the recovery center was a performance. I played the part of the befuddled, weakened old man to perfection. I feigned confusion about my medications, asked the same questions repeatedly, and sighed with weary resignation whenever Mark and Sarah visited. They lapped it up, their condescending smiles widening with each perceived sign of my decline. "Don't you worry about a thing, Dad," Mark would say, his voice dripping with a cloying, false sincerity. "We're handling everything. All the bills, the house maintenance." "It's too much for you now," Sarah would nod, her eyes scanning me as if measuring me for a coffin. "We just want you to focus on getting better, Arthur. Let us take the burden." Oh, they were taking the burden, all right. The burden of my life's work, my memories, my legacy. They were taking it and converting it into cash. During those visits, I learned their plan in excruciating detail. They had hired a cut-rate realtor known for quick, under-market sales. They were planning an as-is sale to a cash buyer to expedite the process. They didn't want to be bothered with repairs or staging. They just wanted the money, fast and easy. They brought me documents to sign, hiding them in a stack of insurance forms and facility waivers. "Just some routine stuff, Dad. For your care." I would squint at the pages, my hand trembling for effect. "Oh, my eyes aren't what they used to be. You just show me where to sign, son," and I would sign, but not before subtly angling the page so the camera on the old tablet I'd claimed was just for reading the news could capture a clear image of each document. The power of attorney was the first and most crucial betrayal, signed a year ago when I'd had a minor health scare. Mark had insisted it was just in case a precaution. Now I saw it for what it was. The key he needed to unlock my life and sell it off. But every plan has a flaw, and their flaw was their arrogance. They saw an old man. They didn't see the man who had run a successful carpentry business for 40 years, who had negotiated contracts, managed payroll, and could spot a con from a mile away. They saw a grieving widower, not the man who had navigated the labyrinth of hospital bureaucracy and insurance claims after Eleanor's long illness. They saw weakness, and in that I found my strength. My secret weapon was a man named George Connolly. George and I had served in the army together, and he later became one of the sharpest corporate lawyers in the state before retiring. He was a bulldog, a man who savored the complexities of the law the way other men savored a fine wine. More importantly, he was my friend, and he had despised the way Sarah treated Mark long before I was willing to admit it myself. The recovery center had strict visiting hours, but they had a lenient policy on phone calls. One night, long after my dutiful son and his wife had gone home to their comfortable life, I dialed George's number. I kept my voice to a whisper, huddled under the thin blanket. "George," I said, the word catching in my throat. "I need your help. It's Mark." I laid it all out. The overheard conversation, the realtor, the power of attorney, the planned sale of my home. George listened without interruption. The silence on his end of the line a coiled spring of fury. When I finished, his voice was gravelly. "That greedy, short-sighted little... Arthur, I am so sorry. But don't you worry. We're not going to let them get away with this. We're going to bury them in their own deceit." The plan George formulated was not one of simple prevention. It was a masterpiece of legal retribution, a trap so elegant and devastating it took my breath away. "We could just revoke the POA and file an injunction to stop the sale," he had explained. "But where's the justice in that? They'll claim they were acting in your best interest. It will get messy." "No, Arthur. We're not going to stop the sale. We're going to let it happen." His idea was audacious. We would create a shell corporation, a limited liability company with a generic name that was completely untraceable back to me. This corporation, funded by my own money, would be the cash buyer for my house. Mark and Sarah, in their rush for a quick sale, would be desperate to accept a lowball cash offer. They would essentially be selling my house to me, using my power of attorney to authorize the sale, and the proceeds would be nothing more than my own money being cycled back to an account I secretly controlled. The first step was to regain control of my finances and legal standing without tipping them off. George drew up a revocation of the power of attorney. The next day, I had a scheduled checkup with my surgeon, Dr. Evans. I made sure to be lucid, sharp, and engaged. I asked intelligent questions about my recovery, my prognosis, and my long-term mobility. I had George send a notary to the doctor's office, timing it perfectly. In front of my doctor as a witness, who gladly attested to my sound mind and full cognitive recovery, I signed the revocation. It was filed with the county clerk's office within the hour. Legally, Mark's power was gone. But he didn't know that. He still held the piece of paper he thought was a golden ticket. Next came the money. Mark had control over my main checking and savings accounts, but he didn't know about the portfolio of municipal bonds I'd set up with a different broker years ago. A nest egg Eleanor and I had called our rainy day fund. It seemed the storm had finally arrived. I contacted the broker, authenticated my identity through a series of questions they thought would stump a man my age, and had a significant sum transferred to a new bank account George had established under his firm's name. This would be the capital for our shell corporation, Hearthstone Investments, LLC, a fitting name, I thought. I was investing in my own hearth. Back in the recovery center, I continued my charade. I would watch as Mark and Sarah brought in brochures for assisted living facilities. "Look at this one, Dad," Sarah would chirp, pointing to a picture of smiling, silver-haired seniors playing shuffleboard. "It has a pool and group outings." Her face was a mask of saccharine concern. "It's for the best. You won't have to worry about the stairs anymore, or the yard work. It's time you let someone else take care of you." I would look at the glossy photos of sterile, cookie-cutter rooms and feel a chill. They weren't just selling my house. They were selling my independence, my dignity. They were trying to file me away in a cabinet until I expired. The realtor they'd hired, a slick man named Barry, came to see me once. Mark and Sarah stood on either side of him, like wardens. Barry was all teeth and cheap cologne. "Mr. Henderson," he began, his voice unctuous. "Mark and Sarah have told me you're ready to make a lifestyle change. I'm here to make the transition as smooth as possible." I let my gaze wander around the room, as if confused. "The house. Eleanor loved that house. And it's a wonderful house," Barry boomed. "But it's a lot of upkeep for one person. We have a very motivated buyer, a cash offer. They're willing to close in 2 weeks. No inspections, no fuss. It's a fantastic opportunity for them." George, through a third-party contact, had already submitted the offer from Hearthstone Investments. As he predicted, it was significantly below market value. But the promise of a fast, all-cash deal was too tempting for my greedy son to resist. They saw it as found money, a quick injection of capital to fund their lavish lifestyle. They had no idea they were simply stealing from my left pocket to put into my right. I looked at Mark, searching his face for any flicker of doubt, any hint of the boy I had raised. I saw nothing, just a cold, hard eagerness. "If you think it's for the best, son," I mumbled, letting my shoulders slump in defeat. "You know best." The look of triumphant pity he gave me was almost unbearable. He truly believed he had won, that he had successfully outmaneuvered his frail, old father. The day I was discharged, they drove me back to the house. It was a surreal experience, walking through my own front door as a guest with an expiration date. Sarah had already begun her conquest. Small yellow sticky notes were everywhere, on furniture, on paintings, on lamps. Garage sale, donate, trash. She was sorting through my life, through Eleanor's things, with the detached efficiency of an estate liquidator. "We're just getting a head start on the decluttering, Arthur," she said, not a trace of shame in her voice. "It'll make the move to your new place so much easier for 2 weeks." I lived in my own home as a ghost. I watched them. I listened. I heard them on the phone with the realtor, with the bank, with a company that sold high-end patio furniture. They were spending the money before it was even in their hands. They had bought a new luxury SUV, telling me it was safer for driving you to your appointments. Dad, the sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. I spent my days quietly packing. Not the things they were sorting, but the things that truly mattered. I boxed up all of Eleanor's photo albums, her collection of porcelain birds, the letters we had written to each other during my time in the service. I moved these boxes into the old crawl space behind the furnace, a place they wouldn't dream of looking. I was saving the soul of the house while they were busy selling its shell. The day of the closing arrived. It was a gray, overcast morning, fitting for the storm that was about to break. Mark and Sarah were practically giddy. They had dressed up as if for a party. Mark wore a new suit, Sarah a dress that probably cost more than my first car. They were heading to the title company office to sign the final papers and pick up the check. They had a celebratory dinner reservation at the most expensive restaurant in town. "Dad, we're off," Mark announced, jingling his new car keys. "We'll be back in a couple of hours. The movers will be here next week to take the things for your new apartment. We'll help you get all settled in. Have a good day," I said, my voice even. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, the one Eleanor had reupholstered herself. I had a cup of tea and a book, the picture of tranquility. They looked at me, a final glance at the old man they had so thoroughly vanquished. They smiled, turned, and walked out the door, closing it firmly on their past and, they thought, opening a door to their glittering future. They had no idea that door was a trap. An hour later, my own guest arrived. It was George, looking sharp in a lawyer's suit, carrying a heavy leather briefcase. He gave me a grim smile. "The wire transfer from Hearthstone to the title company was confirmed 10 minutes ago, Arthur. The money is in their account. The house is officially sold, and officially mine again," I said, a grim satisfaction settling over me. "Precisely," George said, opening his briefcase. "All the documents are in order. The deed is being recorded in the name of the LLC as we speak. And I have the eviction notice right here. We didn't have to wait long. Just before noon, Mark's new SUV pulled into the driveway. They got out, their faces beaming. Mark was holding a cashier's check. They walked up the path to the front door of the house they no longer had any right to enter. They walked in without knocking. "We did it, Dad," Mark declared, waving the check in the air like a trophy. "It's done. The house is sold. You are officially free from all this responsibility." Sarah glided in behind him, her eyes already measuring the living room for a future buyer, no doubt planning how she would advise the new owners. Her gaze fell on George, and her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "George," she said, her voice suddenly tight. "What are you doing here?" "Hello, Sarah." "Mark," George said, his tone icy. "I'm here representing the new owner of the property." Mark laughed. A short, nervous bark. "The new owner? They haven't even gotten the keys yet. What's this all about, George? Trying to drum up some business?" I set my teacup down on the saucer with a soft click. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden silence. I looked at my son. "That's wonderful news, Mark. I'm so glad the sale went through smoothly. Who is the buyer?" "I'd love to know who owns my house now." "It's a company," Sarah said quickly. "An investment firm. Hearthstone Investments. Hearthstone Investments." I repeated, letting the name hang in the air. I nodded slowly. "That's a lovely name. It sounds so solid. So reliable." I turned my gaze to George. "George, would you mind?" George stepped forward and placed a thin folder on the coffee table. He slid it toward Mark. "Hearthstone Investments, LLC is indeed the new owner," he said, his voice carrying the weight of a judge's gavel. "It's a holding company registered in this state. This folder contains the articles of incorporation and the statement of ownership." Mark's brow furrowed in confusion. He looked from the folder to George, to me. He still didn't understand. Sarah, however, was quicker. A flicker of panic crossed her face. She knew something was wrong. "What is this?" Mark asked, his voice losing its triumphant edge. "You don't need to see this." "Oh, but I think you do," George said. "Please, open it." Hesitantly, Mark reached out and opened the folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was the official corporate filing. At the bottom, under the section titled Sole Proprietor and Managing Member, was my name, Arthur Henderson. The color drained from Mark's face. He looked as if he'd been punched in the gut. He stared at the paper, then up at me, his mouth opening and closing silently. Sarah snatched the paper from his hand. Her perfectly made-up face went pale, then mottled with red splotches of rage. "What is this? This is impossible. This is some kind of trick." "It's no trick," I said, my voice calm and steady. It was the first time I had spoken to them in my true voice, without the guise of frailty, in weeks. "It's a simple business transaction. You, using the power of attorney I have since revoked, sold my house. My company, funded with my money, bought it. I believe you got it for a very good price, well below market value. A real bargain. The check you're holding, Mark, is just my own money minus Barry's commission, of course. You've essentially paid a realtor a hefty fee to give me my own money." Mark sank onto the edge of the sofa, the check slipping from his numb fingers. I don't understand. "The power of attorney was revoked 2 weeks ago," George interjected smoothly, producing another document. "Filed at the county clerk's office the day after your surgeon, Dr. Evans, declared you to be of perfectly sound mind and body, Arthur. Any action Mark took with the POA after that date was, legally speaking, fraud." Sarah's eyes, which had been darting around the room like a cornered animal, finally locked on me. They were filled with pure, undiluted hatred. "You can't do this. We did this for you. We were trying to help you." "Help me?" I finally allowed the cold anger I had been suppressing for weeks to surface. "You were helping yourselves. You were selling my home, Eleanor's home, to buy yourselves a new car and a life of luxury. You were going to put me in a home and forget I existed. I saw the brochures. I heard you talking in my hospital room. I know everything." I stood up, my new hip feeling strong and stable beneath me. I walked over to the mantelpiece and picked up a framed photo of Eleanor and me, taken on the day we'd laid the foundation. You didn't just try to sell a house. You tried to sell this. You tried to sell every memory, every sacrifice, every piece of love that is soaked into the very walls of this place. You put a price tag on your mother's legacy. Mark started to sob, a pathetic, gulping sound. Dad, Sarah. She said it was for the best. I didn't know. You knew, I said, my voice like granite. You knew it was wrong and you did it anyway. That's the worst part. You let her greed poison you, and you didn't even put up a fight. I turned my attention back to Sarah, who was now trembling with fury. You thought I was a doddering old fool. You underestimated me. You saw me as an obstacle, a bank account to be drained. You never saw me as a person, as the man who raised the man you married. I set the photo back in its place and turned to face them both, the finality of the moment settling upon me. It wasn't a moment of joy, but one of profound, tragic necessity. The sale is complete. The transaction is final. Hearthstone Investments, my company, is the legal owner of this property. Which means, I said, letting the words fall with deliberate weight, that you are now trespassing. George stepped forward again, holding out a crisp, white envelope. This is a formal notice to vacate the premises. You have 24 hours to remove yourselves and any personal belongings. If you are still here after that time, the new owner will have you removed by the authorities. Sarah let out a strangled cry, a sound of disbelief and fury. Mark just stared at the floor, a broken man. But he wasn't broken by remorse. He was broken by failure. His perfect, easy plan had crumbled into dust. Get out, I said, my voice quiet but absolute. Get out of my house. They stumbled out, not looking back. The front door clicked shut behind them, and the silence that descended was different this time. It wasn't the silence of betrayal or loneliness. It was the silence of peace, of a battle won. George put a hand on my shoulder. Are you all right, Arthur? I looked around the room, at the yellow sticky notes still clinging to my furniture like malignant growths. I walked over and pulled one off a lamp Eleanor had loved. It said donate. I crumpled it in my fist. I'm better than all right, George, I said, a deep, weary sense of justice settling into my bones. I'm home. The next few days were a blur of quiet reclamation. I took down every one of Sarah's sticky notes, a cleansing ritual that felt more satisfying than I could have imagined. I retrieved the boxes of memories from the crawl space, carefully unwrapping Eleanor's porcelain birds and setting them back on their shelf. The house seemed to breathe a sigh of relief alongside me. I learned from George that Mark and Sarah's lives had imploded. The new SUV was repossessed. Their credit cards were maxed out on deposits for furniture and vacations they could no longer afford. The cashier's check from the sale, which was now evidence in a potential fraud case George was holding in reserve, was useless to them. They had lost everything because they had tried to take everything. One evening, about a week later, the phone rang. It was Mark. His voice was thin, stripped of all its former arrogance. He was crying. He apologized. He begged. He said he didn't know what to do. I listened, and I felt a pang of sadness for the little boy with the toy truck, for the young man whose height I had marked on the doorframe. But that boy was gone. In his place was a stranger, a man who had looked at his own father and seen only a dollar sign. I'm sorry for the choices you made, Mark, I said, my voice devoid of malice but also of warmth. I hope you find your way. But your way is no longer connected to mine. I hung up the phone. I knew I had made the right decision. My revenge was not born of hate, but of a fierce, protective love for the life I had built, for the woman I had shared it with. It was a defense of memory against greed, of dignity against disrespect. I had lost a son, but I had saved my home. And as the evening sun streamed through the living room window, just as it had for 40 years, I knew Eleanor would have understood. She would have been proud. My home was safe. My heart, though scarred, was at peace. The foundation was still strong.